The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me again this week. We are talking this week about Mormon fundamentalism and cult activity and a pretty harrowing and interesting story. I am welcoming to the show this week Pamela Jones, the author of a book called The Dirt Beneath Our Door. And she is a woman who grew up in a polygamist fundamentalist Mormon cult. That's really the best, most accurate way I can think of to describe it. And she escaped from that, and she has a story to tell. And this book is actually very, very well written. I was absolutely enthralled by it while I was reading it. And you can find her on the web. This all has, and we're going to stress this at the beginning, all of this has a happy ending. This goes to good places. This is a success survivor story here, but we're going to go through the details of this. So, Pamela, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and more than anything, your audience. Let them know that I end up turning out okay, more than okay.
Exactly. And that's the part that I really want to stress, because getting away or escaping from the group is really just step one. And for, some people think, oh, you got away. Oh, good. It's all done. And it's like, no, it's not all done. It's the beginning of recovery and a whole journey of rebuilding a life. And you came out with children and there's a whole thing here. So let's go ahead and go kind of straight back to the beginning and just kind of walk through it. So first off, you come from an incredibly large family of folks. Tell us about that.
So my father was a member of the name of the church. It's Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Time. It is a church, fundamentalist church founded in Mexico, Chihuahua, down in that area. They actually have a colony named after the founders, which is Colonial LeBaron. And it was 5 original brothers and their father that started the cult. Well, they didn't call it cult then. They called it the Church of God, obviously. And my father joined later on in his life. So he was married to his first wife. They had a beautiful family. He had no intention on living polygamy or living anything like that. He was fully baptized, and he was sealed to his wife in the Mormon LDS church. In fact, he had made a promise to her parents, Velma's parents, that he would never live the law or the principle of plural marriage ever. My father had issues with alcohol, and he frequented bars, and he loved women, to put it mildly. And so a lot of years, they'd been married for about 10 years. And long story short, his wife, Vilma, wasn't sure how to handle him, and he was getting more and more difficult. And then these LeBaron brothers, one of them show up at her home with a pamphlet about this church. And she comes to the conclusion that he must be a polygamist by heart. And she talks to my father, and he agrees to join this cult. There's talk that he may have impregnated a young girl, which ended up being his wife, and they had 15 children. But there's no for sure proof, but numbers don't lie, and there's some iffy stuff there. But fast forward it, or to get to the point, she was 14. They got together and had their first child when she was 15.
Wow.
So my father has passed away, hence that helped me be able to tell the story. But that's how they got started, and my mother was his third wife. And so my father had a total of 11 wives, and 6 of them bore him children, and he has 57 biological children and 6 adopted children. So a big family. Yeah, big family. I get asked all the time, do you know all their names? And I said, yes, I do.
Wow.
And
Wow.
my father's baby. So my father's 41 years older than myself, and I'm his 11th child. So he had me when he was 41, and he went on to have another 46 children after the age of 41.
Wow.
So
A prolific reproducer.
yep, he was. And his baby is 1 year younger than my baby. I couldn't believe that one. And so his youngest child was born in my father was in his mid 70s or late 70s when he had his last child.
Wow. So this is in Chihuahua, Mexico. So you're raised in Mexico.
Yes. So actually, the church has founded several colonies. And I was born in the second colony that was founded over in Baja California, Mexico. The name of the town was Los Molinos. And I was the first child born in that region of the church. And
Okay.
my father helped, I was to say, populate it, but not by his offspring. He brought in Hispanic members of the church from Puebla, Mexico, and they homesteaded the community there and started putting together the church. And I was
Wow.
born down there.
How many folks were part of your colony?
You mean like all the colonies put together, or each individual colony?
Well, the one you were raised in to start with. How many families were there? How many folks were part of this church?
So I actually lived in California, but my father would send his wives into Mexico to give birth because it was cheaper. So that's why I was born into Mexico. We did not live in Mexico at the time. We moved to Mexico to that colonial Los Molinos when I was 11. So in that community, there probably was about 300 people.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's where in my book, if you read it, that's where the raid took place, and I talk a lot about how that was as a child. So in the cult that I was born into, there was a big discussion and a disagreement amongst the five brothers. And there was the prophet, his name was Joe LeBaron. He evidently got some revelation. Now that I've been out of the cult for so long, I realized that I would venture to say hundreds. Somewhere I heard there was thousands of these fundamentalist groups throughout United States and Mexico that have the identical story of how they became the one mighty and strong and the prophet. So he has the similar story that you hear everywhere. And he was chosen, and so he was the prophet of the church. And he had three of his brothers were taking over certain divisions of the church. And one particular brother, his name was Ervil LeBaron, and he was in charge of the civil law of God. And he wanted to have more power and wanted to be the leader. And of course, his brother said no. So they started having some problems, and he decided to implement and start the blood atonement. So, due to that, I never met Ervil. And the only time I remember ever seeing the prophet was in his coffin after being unalived by Ervil. And I was 6. But I lived in the wake of his murders, constantly would be going to funerals or all kinds of stuff from his hit list. And he set off to do several, I say, evil things in the name of God. But as a little girl, I lived in extreme fear of this gentleman who they referred to him as the Mormon Charles Manson. And you can pull that up on the internet and read all about his craziness.
Wow.
What's so funny is my grandmother, when she started bringing her children around the cult, or her daughters, she wanted my mom to marry him because he was so charismatic and tall, beautiful man. And thank God my mom was smart enough not to, or this story would have been a lot different.
Well, I'll say, I mean, this sounds an awful lot like Well, we were speaking briefly before about how there are, down in Mexico, and this being this sort of thing, that there are cartel connections and whatnot. And it's just, this is exactly the kind of thing that comes to mind, is like growing up in the mob or growing up in a criminal organization where violence is the order of the day, and you're attending funerals on a regular basis. I've been to one funeral in my life. and you were going to, these things when you were, before you were even 10 years old.
Right. Well, not only that, one thing about the cult, and you'll read more about this in my book, because we were God's people, that meant that God decided that who lived and didn't die. And they never used the safety that you need. And there's so many horrific mishaps and deaths among the people in the colony. It is so bad. And obviously I've left, but it's so bad that I stopped telling for sure my children because they don't want to hear about it. But I used to have my personal trainer, and every time I'd see him, and it weighs heavy on you when there's someone you grew up with, or someone's grandma that and she's lost a child to being electrocuted, or one to drowning, or digging out in the sand dunes, and the sand dunes give away and smothering, or car accidents, and like just horrific things happen because everybody just safety's not as important because God's on their side. So I honestly have been to more funerals, or been related to more funerals in 1 year than an average human is involved in a lifetime. And I got to where I just stopped talking about it because it just felt like it was so much. But obviously, it's a huge group of people. Like my father, we did the numbers the other day, and he has over 800 descendants, well over that. And he would have turned 100 years old last year. And so when you think about that, there's going to be lots of death as well. And I was talking to someone the other day. I said, so dad has 800 descendants, and they're going to live about 80 years. That means you're losing 100 a year. That's a lot of, statistically, that's a lot of deaths just right there. And they're my sisters and my brother's children or grandchildren, pretty much. We're not talking about my dad's extended family. We're talking about him and his children and their children. So back to what you were saying, like you've only been to one funeral, you can't imagine this. Well, my story starts off, I'm 6 and I'm going to the prophet's funeral, and he's just been murdered by his brother. And then I move into Mexico right behind the massacre when they send, I'm sorry, the raid. Massacre happened a lot later. But anyways, and they send all of these 13 and 12-year-old kids to burn down buildings. And when the townspeople come out to put out the fire, they open fire and shoot them all up. And I'm a little girl, and now here I am, and my father's showing me this, that, and the other. And they find a list, and my father's name is on it. So my first early years of my life was just so full of fear. They had this bell in town that they would ring anytime the Herbalites, is what they called them, were around, and we were to flee to the sand dunes. And to this day, if I hear a bell, which is so funny, I have a certain alarm on my phone that's like, emergency, you have to take care of this. And I put it to ring as a bell. And without bell, I'm scared every time. Like, oh yeah, that's really important. But it was such a traumatic thing as a child to have so much fear and so much death. And that is one of the casualties of the cult and the colony, is not only because of the rivalry between the cult leaders, but then just, I want to say stupidity, but I want to be respectful. So I'll say ignorance. And there's just so much unnecessary death, just so much. Like the women don't get prenatal care when they're pregnant. I mean, you can go on and on and on. And it's just, I know Elizabeth, who's my co-author to my book, she kind of says, like, it feels like that to the people, it's as though it's God's will. There's nothing you can do. And we all just accept death as, like, what are you having for dinner almost?
Right.
But that was how it was there. Of course, I've been away from there for 26 years, but that's how it was when I was there.
Right. Well, it's a horrific upbringing in a modern world where none of those things are necessary now. And that's why we shake our head. We're like, why? Why would people want to live this way? And of course, as a child, born into this. There were no choices for you. But the adults in the room are hardly acting like responsible adults. And as you say, ignorance. I mean, yes, that's a very kind assessment. I mean, this is really bad. I think it's hard for people to get their wits around the idea that this could happen in the modern world, right here in the States, across the border. I mean, people think about Mexico and going down to Tijuana or something and partying and drinking and having a good time and going to Cabo, and that's kind of how they think about that place. Or it's jungles and cartels and drug lords. But this kind of thing, people don't connect dots to religious cults that are hanging out down there and building communities and then creating rivalries with each other and with the communities. This sounds like a very lawless kind of activity.
It is in some ways, it is. And then in other ways, it's to be expected when you're that far away from, I don't want to say civilization, but away from America.
Yeah.
But back in the times of the Mormon time, when this whole fundamentalist stuff started, when they signed the manifesto and you weren't allowed to live polygamy anymore, a lot of the families that had more than one wife, they moved into Mexico so they could continue raising their families, and they colonized all kinds of colonies all through Mexico. You'll run into a group of American people that have been there for how long? 100 years now, or however long it's been. My father's family, because my grandfather had two wives, when he got excommunicated from the Mormon church, he went down into Mexico, horse and buggy, and that's how he moved his family down there. So there's lots of them all over, and these LeBaron brothers decided to start this church, and it got really crazy. And it's still going, even though all the original five brothers have passed away, and most of the original, what do you call them, founders have all passed as well. But it's so funny to me because they still believe in the prophet. His name was Joel. They still believe in him, and he's been gone for 54 years. He's been gone for that long. And like I was telling someone the other day, you know how people will say, I don't know, this is a silly analogy, but it works for me. Like when I leave my house, my children are all here. And the one that's in charge will say, Mom said, and then they'll tell you what Mom said. Mom said, I get the biggest piece of cake. Mom said that you have to do my chores because I'm in charge of the baby. Or they'll go on. These are silly metaphors, but sometimes I use the most simple ones. And they'll go on saying all these things Mom said. Well, I'm not there for the kids to verify it, and they are in charge, right? And now when we're talking about the cult, the prophet has been gone for 54 years. But the things that man said, my goodness, Joel taught. I mean, Joel taught that the women could come into the United States and have their babies and never pay that bill because they're giving birth to the Lord's people. Joel taught that we can steal all the American vehicles and bring them into Mexico and sell them for parts because American people have insurance and they're Gentiles. Joel taught, I mean, the criminalities that he taught. I heard more about the breaking of laws that he taught supposedly more than anything else. And I think it was just to justify corruption. And my own father, and I talk about it in my book, I mean, I was too little to know what was being smuggled into Mexico, what the laws were, what the rules were. I was just a little girl, but he had a system, and we were to do all these certain things when he was taking truckloads of something into Mexico. And after the raid in Los Molinos, pretty soon every little Hispanic man was armed with some kind of gun to protect the townspeople, and they sure didn't buy them from the flea market. But it was just amazing, the belief that they could break all the laws, any kind of law, in the name of God. So to me, that's the most terrifying thing, in my opinion, because now you have this prophet that is a martyr who died, and he's been gone for so long, and all the things they say he taught, and who can prove that? I'm too young.
I was wondering how much of this did he write down versus how much of this is opportunism or the telephone game where people think they heard something, and then forward what they think they heard, but it's not actually what he said. And you could have any variety of these things as to, did he write much down, this prophet?
No, he didn't. Some people have a few recordings of him, but everybody that, or a lot of the people remembered and then they wrote things down. But I honestly, I mean, that he would give little 14-year-old girls to men for wives and condone that and support that, supposedly, though he didn't marry a 14-year-old. There's just so many things that I believe that was just corrupted from the people themselves. And I never met the man. I really don't think he had enough time. What, he died before he was 50? I don't think he had enough time to figure all that out, besides have the large family that he had. But yeah, it's just interesting that the whole cult down there and what they've done with their churches beyond. But it's interesting. And
Hmm.
truthfully, it's lost the power that it had before. They're just circular, they have just a little bit of everything in there. I mean, you name it, they have it going on. But yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun for me to be able to just regain my voice and speak my truth, because when I was born and because I was a woman, the minute I exited my mother's beautiful body and came to this earth, it was already decreed what I would and would not do. And that all happened when the doctor said it's a girl. And then
Right.
I was told, no one needs to hear you. Your opinion, your voice does not matter. You need to obey, be a handmaiden, and help meet to your husband. Give him as many children as you can. He is the head of all things. And so, being married to him, I never, ever could voice an opinion. I remember one time he caught me reading the back of a piece of you're gonna laugh at this one, but he was pouring some cement floor. So he had bought concrete cement that you mix in concrete, whatever it's called. And I was reading the back of the I was just curious, and I wanted to say, well, there's words on there. I should probably, well, I wonder if I could still read those words. And he asked, what are you doing? And I said, reading. Why? And I thought, because I can. I went to school until I was, to fifth grade. And he said, you don't need to do any of that. That's nonsense. And when I was married to the father of my kids, I wasn't to be educated in anything, not not reading, not writing, not studying. I just need to learn how to care for my children and raise my family, and obviously help his posterity and all the things that I had to do for him. Which I think it's so funny because I'm soft spoken, so that's probably why I have to stand so close here. And I hated the sound of my voice, and I struggled to speak. And yet I'm a public speaker and I wrote my book and I tell the whole world what I've been through. It makes me laugh now. When I first escaped the cult, my first little trial was I had to go through a drive-through and order a hamburger. That was the hardest thing I ever did. And so I
Wow.
drive up and I order, soft spoken, can I get a hamburger? And she mentions, like, whatever. And it was a foreigner, so they had a little bit of an accent. And when she started asking about fries and what kind of drink, I just got scared and I got out of the line. A few weeks later, I thought, I'm going to try this again. And that's how first thing I did to regain my voice and regain my strength. And it was a beautiful journey. And I always do little kindergarten pictures when I try to tell my stories, because I'm talking to my grandkids most of the time too. And just, that's what it was. Grandma had to figure out how to order a hamburger. And I was well into my 30s because I wasn't allowed to speak or use my voice ever.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get it. It is an extreme religious belief set that y'all were operating on down there, and it created a culture of massive levels of ignorance. To exactly as you're describing. I mean, and it's not even it's not even like I'm trying to be harsh or judgy. It's just, my
It
goodness,
just was. That's
how
just what
could
it was.
yeah, it just is what it was. I struggle to understand why the men in this outfit would choose to live this way. Could you explain how they were approaching this or coming at this? Were they raised in it too? I mean, was this
Well,
their world
yeah.
also?
Well, the original LeBaron family is all related to Joseph Smith, and he's the what is he, the founder of the LDS Church. So
Mm-hmm.
they come from that family line. That's where they come from. So it was a way of
Mm.
life that's all they knew. So having more than one wife is one thing, and I support any kind of a marriage that's healthy out there. Truly, I do. But, so, okay, there's these five brothers and they want to have several wives. Well, was that the sin? Was that the struggle? No, it was this power hungry, this, but, they would use young women to lure more men in. So now they would come to the United States and they would preach the gospel and they would promise them a land of milk and honey and then all these young daughters. So as soon as I turned 13-ish, right in that age, and all my other sisters, they would parade us around in ways like, I have these daughters. And unfortunately, there was a market for that. And men after men would join the church. They could have a brotherhood. They could join this, united order that they were living. They'd have this beautiful land. They'd have this brotherhood, and they could have these young girls. And it
Wow.
lured them in. Now, my father, his father had lived polygamy, so he had come from that, and the LeBaron brothers had come from that as well. But if you even read a little bit, I don't know if you're interested about Brigham Young and how he did what he did. It blows my
Hmm.
mind what that man did. But
Hmm.
one of the things in common is he would do the same. He lured these men in and promised them these young women and
Right.
land. And it's the
Right.
same thing. So, like my husband, because I'm remarried now, and he's just intrigued with the story. And he says, I barely can handle you. Who would want more?
That's what I tell my wife, right? Whenever that comes up, it's always like, why would I, how, this is a full-time occupation keeping this relationship going. The idea, this is what has always, sort of blown me away about polygamy is how do you even imagine you're going to maintain meaningful relationships with so many people? It boggles me. But clearly, this is a group that is kind of selecting for people who are into this, or guys who really kind of think this is the great way to live, I guess, which answers the question of what are these guys about? Well, they're very much about
I have
this
an
kind of
idea.
empowerment. Tell me.
Well, let me,
Yeah.
yeah, my idea is, then I believe this, that these men don't have to grow up. They're just a perpetual baby. They have all these women, not only taking care of every whim the man needs, and there's so much competition amongst the women, you don't dare cause any ruckus. So they have, you know, 7, 8, 10 women that are on their best behavior because they're all up to be the favorite. Then they have all these children, and they all start working on the farms and the whatever you're doing. So the financial burden is lifted with the children and the wives, and they go around being honestly just 4-year olds throwing their little fits. I don't feel like this. I don't want that. And there's always another woman that will let him get away with it because for that moment, it's her night, it's her day. I will just, allow him to do whatever. And that's what my husband and I, we talk about because he thinks like, oh, I couldn't have another one of you. And I said, well, this girl has never been married in polygamy. It was just someone that was there to serve him. You had no opinion, you had no dreams, no desires. Your job was to serve him. So when you
Right.
think about it, he really didn't have to support all these kids. And I mean, I'm being honest, I can't ever think of my father ever supporting me when I was growing up. And I was his 11th child. My mom worked 3 jobs to raise and clothe and feed us. He did not. And so there in a meaningful relationship, how meaningful can it be when you have a few hours, if at all, and there's all these women in between and experiences and whatever these everybody needs, someone else is pregnant, someone else has got a new baby or whatever else you're going through. I mean, there was never any individuality or heartfelt conversation. It was just you were given instructions for that day and you did what was told for you that you needed to do. And that's the miracle of my book is because there was an inside knowing that I was created for something more. I knew that I was going to be able to do something outside of this cult, but at that moment I'd look around, what? When I was pregnant with my children, most women, because I have a bunch of grandkids now, and I watch my daughters and daughter-in-laws and how they prepare for the new child, and it's so precious. They're buying the pink or blue, this or well, nowadays they use different colors, but whatever, and setting up the baby's room, and they're doing all this stuff to get ready for this new child. And then I say, oh, when I would get ready, for my child, besides being pregnant and washing the old clothes we had from the baby before, I would go out in the dirt and practice signing my name because I was going to sign a legal document. And that was the only time I ever wrote or signed anything. So I would sit in that dirt while my washing machine's going and practice from what I remembered when I went to school, how you do handwriting and you put all your letters together. And I would practice that for the months that I was pregnant so that I would be able to sign these legal documents because nothing else I ever did was of any value. Nothing else that I ever did. I never managed money. I never had an opinion. So for a little while, my book was going to be named and sign my name 9 times because I had only signed my name 9 times. And fast forward to the multi-million business woman that I am today, I sign my name thousands of times. And it's just so funny that I started from such meager beginnings to where I am today. But the cult's belief was that a woman was like cattle, it was a possession. Whatever
Right.
his needs were, then that's what you were there for.
Right. This is the ultimate expression of the submissive wife, which is not just in the FLDS church. We see this rampant throughout the evangelical world here in America, unfortunately. But to the degree of this is, even in a lot of, amongst the Duggars or something, that I think this level of what you're describing, even there would be kind of unthinkable. Because this is truly a literal all the way interpretation. You have no function but making babies and do what I say, and that's it. And
Yeah.
that was your upbringing. Um, I want to ask about that because yet you are a human being and you do have a will and a brain and desires and things you want and a personality that makes you different from all the other girls and women around you. And so does every other woman who's around you, right? So that's the actual reality of the situation, regardless of what these men keep imposing on you and this belief set and culture. Um, and I understand the contest between the women to vie for first place and stuff. I've heard of that before in polygamy relationships, but for you in that growing up in that environment, how do you think about that now? How would you describe that world compared to the world we can kind of relate to better ourselves?
Well, honestly, it's going to sound morbid, but I actually appreciate that time of my life, even though I wouldn't want it for any of my children. That's how I got out, was taking them away from that. But at the time, you don't know anything different. So at the
Right.
time, I was in a good situation, and the father of my children was never physically violent ever. It was all emotional, which is sometimes worse. But so looking back at that time, and on one of the podcasts I did a while back, anytime I think about it, I get emotional. People ask me, why are you emotional? And it's not because of the pain of that time. It's just I see that little girl that I was, and I was trying so hard to get to heaven. So hard, whatever it was. That's all I ever wanted. I had all the kids to get to heaven. I did everything to be good enough and get to heaven, and I never was good enough for the father of my children. And looking at myself now, as you asked the question, I'm just like blown away at the possibilities that there is in the world and what a human, whether you're battered or you're emotionally abused or whatever you could think of has happened to you, that you actually can take that and use that to propel you to greatness. And that might not sound logical, but I'm living proof that it is logical,
Mhm.
and it's doable. And people have asked me, well, did you go to therapy? And I kind of laugh. I said, you know what kind of therapist it takes to deal with this girl? I mean, I couldn't. I'm not saying they're not out there, but boy, it was going to take someone that really, really knew their stuff, not just tell me, oh, pat me on my back. That wasn't going to work. I needed something different, which I became my own therapist. But in my wildest dreams, along with everything they took from me, they could not take my imagination. They couldn't take that. They could say yay at the end of the day. No one was in my head and no one could take that. And I promise you, my wildest. extremist imagination could not fathom the life that I live today. It could not have even imagined that this was something that existed. And it didn't happen overnight. But when I look at the girl that I am today, and I tell the story all the time, and I see the whole story of everything I went through when I was 15 and I got married, and my grandmother was at my wedding, and I married this man. He brings a girlfriend to my wedding, and he goes on to marry all these women, and all the abuse and the neglect. And he ends up neglecting the children. I raised all 9 kids without a dad in their life at all the abuse, all of it. When I see it all, the chances of not being who I am today by making a change to that is not worth the risk, because I know how she turns out. And I'm not just saying this physical body that you see here or my bank account. I'm talking about internally. I know how she turns out, and it's not worth taking the risk, because I truly believe that all of that served me. Was it necessary? I would say no, but it is what it is, and it did happen for me. And I just feel grateful. I wake up with such gratitude that, and I told this to someone the other day, so I'll share it with you. So the father of my children, regardless of who or what he is, which is really interesting. He just married a 20-year-old, and he's 66, I think, and they have a new baby. And she's not even from the cult. But either way, he has another baby. He hasn't taken care of his 50 children, but he has another one. He'll do that. But anyways, I tell people this, that I love that man. And they say, wow, you're still in love with him? I said, I'm not in love with him. I said, but I love that man. And they asked me, well, why? Why do you love him? So because he's given me the 2 things I value more than my own life. What are those 2 things? I said, he's given me my children, and he gave me my freedom. And they say, how did he give you your freedom? You escaped. I said, I know, I escaped. But listen, if you're in prison and they have this chain link fence all around you and you can't get out, there's that one little weak link in there, and you know where it's at. And you look at that little fence, and you know that weak link, and that's how you get out. I'll forever be grateful for that weak link. And that's how I look at the father of my children. Because of his weaknesses, I was able to escape the cult.
Right.
And when I escaped, and God didn't strike me by lightning, and he didn't hurt my children, and he actually blessed me, women left the cult by the dozens. I have several sisters that have left, and it has just changed. It's changed the cult and the brainwashing, and I'm sure it's timing. It's not just what I did. I was just played one part, time and where we are in the world, and access to information and resources and all that the world's doing. But so I don't want to say that I did it, but it happened to be on the same timing. But once I did escape and people watched and saw, then women left, right, and left. And I just am grateful for that, to be honest. And I used to say this, oh, if I just save one person, it was worth it. But it's not worth it anymore. I better save a lot of people. And so that is my mission, sharing my story, telling people, we all have something, even you and I could probably sit here and talk about our differences for a while, and what you've experienced in your life and what I have experienced, you're male and female, and our lifestyles. But at the end of the day, we both have come from somewhere before we got here, and we are here doing something. Hence, you have your podcast, so that in itself tells me that you and I are on the same page. Just the fact that you have your podcast and you're on the other side of this camera here, and you have a passion and a heart to do what you do, and it's the same as what I'm doing. So I feel like however we got here is beautiful, interesting, can showcase that we can do hard things, but what are we going to do with that? And I think that's the secret sauce in my book. And the secret sauce to me is, what am I going to do with that? I can sit here all day long, and I've had my pastor, I've had several people tell me, if I've ever met someone that, should be drinking or on something, it's you. And he says, have you ever taken anything or drank anything? And I said, well, Pastor, I considered Tylenol PM one time. And he just laughed his hindy off. And I said, I considered it. So I'm confessing my sins, but no, I took it on the chin, because I had a dream, a purpose, and that was to be where I am today, where I think you are as well, making a difference in this world. And I'll say for me, selfishly, being the person that I needed when I was doing all of that stuff.
Exactly. I very much can relate to so much of what you just said. I mean, I was raised in a cult, and while I wasn't raised out in Mexico in primitive conditions, the mindset is so relatable. And the sort of oppression of imagination and self, and you live to serve. This is a mantra in the thing I was involved in, right? Is literally being told over and over again and chanting over and over again that I am only as valuable as I can serve others, which is a slave mentality. It's exactly what they want you thinking, is you have no worth outside of what you're doing for, in your case, your husband and your community. And for me, it was my community, and ultimately this fantasy about saving the world, which was my whole focus for decades of my life. And I no longer suffer from the illusion that I'm saving the world. But as you say, working with people one on one is absolutely fantastic, and I want to educate and inform so many people about this stuff because it's all around us in so many ways. So I feel like I get it, because also on that point of not feeling regretful and feeling like, oh, it all sucked and I was such a victim. That kind of stuff, you can kind of get into that from time to time, and when you have your moods, right? But really, looking back on it, I wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened, and who knows where else I would be. Maybe not doing this, and so not helping people, and so maybe not making a difference in people's lives. And so you have to acknowledge that it's all part of the journey. And I think that for me, the way I think about that is kind of coming to a place of acceptance, right? Where it's not full of regrets and not full of, oh, I wish it had been different. It's like, no, it's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
And,
Well, when you're having children, so that always hits me kind of
mm,
hard. Like, oh, if this happened to my daughter, oh my goodness, I would be feeling so much, just different, just so different. But being
right.
because it happened to me, it's just like, oh, I can handle it. It's no big deal. But truthfully, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I suffered severe, not to mention you go through sexual abuse because the family is so big and there's plenty of brothers that are older than you and whatever comes with that. And then you're married off to an older man. Then I was lucky. My husband was only, 7 years older than me. So it wasn't that much. I was 15 and he was 22. But, you go through all these not even mind games because they're not games. You lose your identity. You get to a
Mhm.
point where I know this sounds silly, but sometimes I look down at my arms and say, or my hands, or what is there a number somewhere? Like, because it didn't matter what my name was, it didn't matter anything about me. I was just there to serve.
Right.
And when I look at that, yes, and I'm going lightly on the stories with you, and we can always go deeper. You'll have to ask me and I'll answer those questions because sometimes I
Sure.
forget all the stuff you went through. But truthfully, it was horrific. And then, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, that the hard stuff started once I left. And that's the truth.
Mhm.
That's when my life got hard. Because as long as I was stuck in the mess, then I was just a victim to the mess. And there was nothing more I can do. Well, I can't ever talk to anybody, so I won't learn that talk. And why should I, whatever my excuses were, and just be obedient. And I could blame him for everything that went wrong. Oh, it's his fault. He's in charge of this stuff, whatever it was, or whatever I could tell myself, not saying verbally, I wouldn't dare say it, but internally.
Mm.
But when I left the cult, and as you read in my prologue, when I left the cult, a lot of healing started the moment I got in the vehicle. Well, the minute I stuck my foot out the threshold and I said, okay, God, you're going to have to take my life. Everybody said you would. And so here I am. My foot's out the threshold and I look up into the heavens and nothing happens. And I have my hand on the screen door. Okay. And at that moment, I felt like at any second along my journey, he was going to take my life or that of my children. And I still
Right.
kept going. And what's so interesting is I believed that I would die. That was my biggest fear. I would die or my children would die. But let's just say, for what I'm going to tell you, I believed that I would die. So I put my foot out the threshold. I don't die. And I look into heaven. I said, okay, God, I'm going. I'm going. You have to do something if you want me to stay. And nothing happens. And then, and finally I said, okay, take my life. But until you do, I'm going to keep going. And when I meet you, we will talk about this. But what
Mhm.
is so interesting is I look back, you asked me a few minutes ago, I look back at that day and at that girl. She did die because I no longer am that girl. That day when I left, that quiet, submissive, little soft spoken, full of fear, God don't love me men, they're the ones that have all the power and they decide what your worth is. All that went away. And in her place, I sprouted out and I
Mhm.
became me and I got on the journey to rediscovering who I was. And I don't mean it hypothetically. I mean, really, like, okay, I know I'm a female. I've had these babies. And I would just start rediscovering who I was as a human. Someone had in their mind, heart, or however people believe, an idea to create humanity. There was a purpose for that. And I'm female, so there was a purpose for that. And I get cold and I get hungry and I get emotional and I have a heart and then I have all these feelings. And then I'm thinking, okay, what are they for? If I'm supposed to stuff it all away and not activate them, then why have they been given to me? So then I
Mhm.
started to rediscover my humanity. That it was okay to be sad and it was okay to be even mad or angry sometimes or hurt
Mhm.
or have a dream and like a color, love a kind of music, and all these things started flowing out of me. I'm like, who is this person? With all this stuff, and it was so fun. And I don't take that lightly. Maybe that's why I'm a good grandma. I'm constantly telling my, what's your favorite this? And what do you think about that? How do you feel about the other? Because I just value individuality and I value the human experience. So when I hear it out there, it doesn't sound as important as I'm trying to make it sound. But until I die, I'm going to continue having this experience as a human. And it's so valuable. And every bit of it, talking to you today is nothing but a joy, nothing but a joy. And,
Excellent.
and I hope you feel the same. Either way, if you don't tell me.
No, it's fine. I
But
again, no, I get it. Yeah, yeah. For many, many years, and again, this is just to relate. It's not, this is not about just a
sure.
little
We're having a
compare
fun.
contrast. You know what I mean? That's all.
I love the comparison because I feel
Yeah.
like we are on the same page. So don't you
Well,
worry about me.
exactly. For many, many years, when I was at the highest levels of Scientology, working, I'm right in the middle of Hollywood, California. I mean, it's the heart of LA, but we were in our own little bubble world. We might as well have been in the middle of the desert for all the access we had to that world. And so my highest goal, the most aspirational thing I could think of to have or do that would be something that I would have enjoyed was to have a steak dinner. That was it. That was all of this,
Wonderful.
all of my life now. Just like you said, this is what I connected with so much in what you just said was, this was unimaginable. All of this was not any part of the picture of what I imagined my life could be if I were to leave the cult, right? It was just, I could have a steak dinner, you know? And
It's so beautiful. Just by you saying that, I get what you're saying. Like,
yeah,
and people are probably looking at you, a steak dinner, really? Of all the things, a steak dinner? And don't you want, the lottery numbers for the or whatever people are saying? But it's that simple being in such a situation that the most simplest pleasures felt like the pinnacle of pleasures, the most simple
yeah,
thing. I
yeah,
think that showcases how much was taken from us or you, or how much we had given up or not even knew was there by the fact that you're saying a steak dinner. And my mother loves steak. So when you said that, it gave me chills. I was like, oh my gosh, my mom just loves steak. And it's like, how precious, like you, human, God's creation, or whatever everybody believes,
Yeah.
creation on this earth. You're a man, you're born to this situation, and all this stuff is being taken from you. Your value is only how much you can do, probably for the leaders or whoever it was.
That's right.
And then you're saying, but my little dream, could I have a steak dinner? It just almost makes me want to cry because I get that. Like, and
Yeah.
then, you sent that intention. Obviously, somewhere along the line, you set out that intention. And here you are in your studio and all of this, whatever you want to call it. You're
That's right.
talking to me and you have a whole world of experiences that a steak dinner is still delicious, I'm sure, but it can't compare. It can't compare.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you, because you planned. Okay, let's go back to your escape, right? Because this is a real focal point in your life, and it was something you, in fact, maybe it could even be framed as the first thing you did that was truly your thing to do for you, right? You got the credit card, you made some plans, you thought about your children, you thought about, okay, I don't know what's out there, I have no idea what's out there, but I'm going to take these steps. And what I'm really curious about is why, what happened, or what clicked, or what changed that you went, okay, I've got this comfortable life, this life you have, and yet I need to aspire to something different. Was it the kids? Was it you? What created that?
Well, all the time I was married, it was nothing but hardship and extreme amount of sacrifice for the
Yeah.
father of my children. He was taught and believed to keep us in extreme poverty. If he could keep me wanting for every single thing a human needs, then he had full control. So if I was thirsty and I had to come to him for water, he was in control. Shelter, clothing, food, medicine for the kids, everything. I had to come to him. And there was always, if you needed 2 drops of water, there was only 1 drop. Silly analogy, but still. In other words, he was that way. So I was suffering, obviously, while I was with him, which I was willing to do. But since you asked this question, so my second son was 16 at the time, and he was going to get his braces on. My oldest child had already had his braces, and now my second son was going to get his braces on. He's sitting in the living room, and we're talking about this. He's going to get some teeth pulled, and then they're going to start, the process. And he's a tender boy, but he doesn't cry all the time, or he didn't cry all the time. And all of a sudden he's looking down and I'm talking to him about the process and I see tears dripping down his face. And I'm thinking, what's going on? So I get real close to him. Son, it's going to be okay. They put numb your mouth and you won't feel it when they pull the teeth. Yeah, you'll be sore. And I'm telling him all this stuff. And he lets me say that stuff. And he says, Mom, no, it's not that. And I said, what is it? And he says, Mom, I'm so tired of seeing you like this. I just don't want to see you like this no more. And I'm thinking, what is this? And it kind of hit me between the eyes when he said that I thought I was making all of these sacrifices to save my family. And I realized that I was only hurting my children. And
Mm,
when I got that realization, it didn't matter what I'd been through. As a mom, most moms will say that and they can relate to that, maybe
yep.
dads as well.
Yep.
But when it came to that, my children were suffering because of what I was choosing to live under. I started the planning and I realized at that moment, like, it's so silly. I wonder, why didn't I think about it before? But I didn't. I realized that I would have 5 little me's running around and 4 little of my ex-husbands if I didn't escape. And that's all it took to give me the will to pay the price. And so I started planning. And my first step of planning, and you can edit this out if it's not appropriate for your show, but birth control was of the devil while I was in the cult. And we were taught that we had to be perpetually pregnant. So I was married for 18 years, pregnant 17 times, and I nursed all my children till they were a year old. So I was constantly giving from my physical body to a baby, whether it was internal or external through nursing. And I went and purchased spermicide at Walmart when we happened to go into the United States for something. I was shaking. I was so scared. You would think that I went to buy some heroin or something the way I acted. I was so scared and hoping that God couldn't read the box from heaven as I tried to sneak it off the shelf and figure it out. And I didn't have to use it very often because he had a large family, but the chances that he would force me to become pregnant to keep me trapped there was so scary that was the first step I took into preparing for my escape. And maybe
Wow.
that's TMI, but it's the truth.
It's not, I get it. I'm not editing any of that out. That's exactly what I want to know.
And then from there, I needed to organize and fix my children's papers. They were American citizens born abroad, and I had not fixed all their paperwork. So I started the process, and my father ended up helping me with that. And it was convenient for the father of my children that I did that work because then he could send our children to the United States to work for the dollar and bring that into Mexico. So he didn't give me any trouble on doing that work, but he had no idea I was planning on leaving.
Right.
So I started that. Those are the two first things that I started doing. And mentally, it was kind of like something snapped real quick, where it's like, oh, it had to do with my kids. And then all bets were off. And I got on the bandwagon of saving the children from this future. And it happened quickly. And I started doing little like mental testing, and it worked for me. Like, I knew once I left the cult that my brain would try to play tricks and say, "Oh, but you know, your ex-husband loves you so much. And he needs you and he misses you." So I started laying little traps beforehand. And I one time went up to my ex-husband and I said, "You know, I feel like you don't love me as much as you used to," but I did it in a cheerful way. I wasn't crying and, "Oh, you don't love me." It was like, "I just feel like you don't love me like you used to." And he thinks for a minute. He says, "You know what? You're right. I don't." And that hit hard. And I thought, okay, I have that. Then later on, I asked him like another little question. So I started doing little things to mentally have the tools I was going to need when I got weak. Because I've heard so many women leave and then they get weak and come back, and I was determined not to come back. So that was kind of some of the stuff I started doing. I remember we were living our normal life. The father of my kids was in town. He was home, and I had this sense of loneliness like I can't even explain. And I stopped for a minute. I thought, my nickname is Rena, and so I said, "Rena, you're so lonely, and your husband's right here in town." So I made that mental note so that when I left and I felt loneliness, I would be able to say, "Hey, you were lonely when you were there." And I think that I was a very intelligent woman, which is very clear that I was, because you can see what I've done with my escape and what I've done with everything. So I think those signs of that kind of stuff was showing then that I knew enough to plan ahead so that I could have the tools I needed when things got tough. So I started a lot of that planning. There's silly little things that I did no one would have known. And then once the down there in the cult, once a wife is getting rebellious, then they start taking her to these meetings amongst the men where she's to be judged. And so he started those meetings and stuff. And with every meeting I went to, I stuck to the points, never got emotional, and kept repeating, but this is what he did and this is what he said. Without fail, the men called him to repentance. I looked good in their eyes, which was unheard of. So I kept learning how to express myself in a way then that would help me know that I had done the right things. Because you can't just wake up one day and then you zoom in and now you're in America. And you know, there's that saying that you can take the girl from the country, but you can't take, it's hard to get the country out of the girl. So I started removing the cult from my way of thinking before I left.
It was brilliant. Because that's exactly, because you were observing that other women had tried and failed. And that observation, I can't underline boldface that enough. As someone who works in this field, that's exactly how to start, because if you imagine it as a prison of belief, you're doing the prison escape. You're taking the toothpick or the toothbrush or the sharpened rock or whatever, and
Nail
you're
filer.
chipping. That's right, chipping away at those walls. And there's a little hole, and you're developing it. How long was that process before from beginning of prep to walking out the door and taking the kids?
Well, once I put things in action, it was 6 months.
Okay.
So it was
All right.
6 months it took me. That was from the moment I saw my child break down, and it dawned on me. That's when that all bets were off, and I already knew that I had to get out. And that's
Mm.
when I started. I didn't know how it would go. I found a $5 bill in the washing machine that had come out of my then husband's laundry. He never allowed us to ever have money, so I didn't know anything about money. And
Yeah.
he would go to the United States in let's see, September of every fall, and he would harvest the pine nuts from Nevada. So he had this briefcase, and I would help him do a lot of different things. And I saw some credit cards in there that had my name on it. And it said Pamela Jones, Visa. And I think, what the heck are these? So while I was with him on this particular trip, I pulled out those cards. There was two of them. And I called the number on the back. And I guess I figured out how to do the prompting and all, and found out how much money they had on them. And he would pay them all off. So then the following year, he could have them to start the process again. So I put them back in his briefcase and didn't touch them till the pine season was over. And then I got them out, and I had those two credit cards. One had, I believe one had $400 on it, and the other one had like $1,200. And to me, that was enough money to live for 2 years. I
Right.
was like, in my mind, I was set. I had no idea what it was going to cost to be in America. But in my mind, that was the most money I had ever heard of, seeing as how I got $50 a month, or sometimes, less, to take care of my children. So to me, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm so lucky. I found out real quick that that was the case, but it was a tool that I had in my quiver, an arrow I had that I thought, okay, I have this. And I think at the time I needed to feel that safety, because there was none of my family, no one was going to help me. And I was
Mhm.
just so ignorant, you might say, or full of fear. I never thought to turn to the government for any kind of help. I don't know why I didn't think to say, look, I'm being held against my will. This is where I'm from. I was so scared. I was determined to do it on my own.
Right. Absolutely. Again, so many things I can relate to, but let me just say in response to that last bit there that, of course, it never, it literally never occurred to me to call the police. I could see people beaten in
Exactly.
front of me. I could be beaten on. It doesn't even enter your airspace. Oh, I should call the police, because the authority figures are, the husband, the pastor, and that's it, or whatever they
Right,
are. And
right,
and for me, it was Scientology's structure, and
right,
my whole life I'd been, very, very set up to believe that this structure was senior, and it had way more authority and truth to it than any policeman. Those
right,
guys don't know what the hell they're doing. They're corrupt. They're awful. They're horrible. They're worldly. They're part of the unholy, if you will. And we didn't talk that way, but it was those kind of ideas. And
right,
so, if that was not a solution, that was just going to be an even bigger problem.
right,
So yeah, so absolutely
right.
not. I
It
have to ask
reminds
you.
me. Go ahead.
Mhm. No,
I
go
was going to
ahead.
say, just real quick to add to what you're saying,
Yeah.
it reminds me of something my husband told me once, because he
Mm.
grew up on a quarter horse farm. And he said that he had this horse, called him Big John. And he said, I never had to lock him in his corral or in his gate, because when he was little, he got used of being in that corral. And there was always like a rope across the doorway. So it would come up to that, and it was there. And he said, we removed the rope years before the horse ever died, and never left, because all it ever knew was there was no exit through that doorway. And I feel like it matches what you're saying when you say you didn't call the police. It's not because you were dumb, or you didn't, oh, I decided not to, and I was so scared. Don't call the police. You never even entertained the idea, because it wasn't a thing.
No,
It was just like, this is all you knew.
that's right.
Why would you call the police?
That's
It
right.
was,
It's that kind of thing. I mean, tell me what you've run into, but in all the years I've been doing this, I've been out for 12 years, talking about this stuff, thinking about this stuff, recovering from this stuff, but mostly trying to explain it to people. These are the points that they have the hardest time getting their wits around because they've lived lives where these things were available to them. And when they were in school, they were told, the police and the firemen and these are the people you go to. And all of that was overridden in our minds if it was there in the first place, And so they have the hardest time getting their head around how different it can be that you don't think that way. Have you run into that?
all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I'll even run into stuff where someone will say, "Oh, you're from the cult. That's why you're that way." I think, no, I had to, I had to learn to be this way too, just like you have to. I'm human. Oh, that's
Right.
why you're so kind, is because you had to share your husband. No, I mean, I want to rip some women's hair out, but whatever. But yeah, I hear it all the time that because I'm from Mexico, from the cult, that's why I'm the way I am. And I think, no, that is not the cult that I was from. I had to fight hard to be able to be the person I am. Therefore, I value, free speech and expression and storytelling and patience and grace and kindness and all the stuff that we do, which I can see that you have the same in your life.
Yeah.
But being that you're out 12 years, maybe physically you've been out 12 years, but I'm sure at some point you started your journey to get out as well, long before you left. And what is so beautiful in both our stories, and I'm sure we're just a drop in the bucket compared to the whole world, so there's probably a whole lot of us out there. The fact that as humans, that we actually have the ability to know what our soul is speaking to us, and have the courage to take that one step, maybe just eat that steak dinner, maybe it's just, take that one step. It wasn't like the whole enchilada, it was enough, just that small little thing. And I think the small thing is how greatness is built. And I think that it just is a testament to humanity. You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
yeah, there is extreme circumstances, and I'm not talking about those victimized extreme circumstances, but the fact that you could get out, and I'm guessing that a lot of your guests, or if not all your guests on your show, are more of the same people that have done hard things as I have.
Yep.
And the more I'm on this journey, the more I see more of us, and maybe we're all escaping some kind of something. I don't know, but it's encouraging to me. All the more it just feels right, and it feels like us as humans, all of the humans, not just you and I. Like, what an amazing creation, humanity is.
Absolutely. I'm all about that human spirit. I really am, and the drive that is there because we can do amazing things. Um, So speaking of, could you give a little rundown on your escape? Because um, I think it's a fascinating story, and it was harrowing to read. So
Yeah.
you don't have to do the whole thing, but could you kind of describe what you had
Yeah.
to go through in order to cross the border and get over here?
Sure. Sure. So, all my children were Mexican citizens, except for one of my daughters that happened to be born early in the United States. Other than that, the rest of the children were all Mexican citizens. And the cult had us brainwashed that if any of us tried to escape or leave, that they would plaster the pictures of all of our family at the border, and then they would claim that we had abandoned our home, and then they would either ship the children back home, and because I was an American citizen, they would take the children from me and then keep me, and they have you brainwashed. So that's one of the things. So on the day that I decided to leave, as I mentioned earlier, and I walked through that screen door, and I was waiting for God to take my life, and He didn't. Every second of the trip, and for a few years after that, it was constantly waiting for, okay, is this going to be the time? Is that going to be the time? So I left there feeling that whatever it took, I could lose my life at some point, or the children. So I white knuckled the dang steering wheel as I drove up over the Cuesta, and had all these memories of all the things I had suffered and gone through because I was born to this cult of woman. And I kept feeling that this sounds weird. I can't think of the exact little stick figure commercial I've seen where someone's wearing a bunch of stuff and then they're going real fast and the hat falls off and the scarf falls off and the jacket falls off and then the vest falls off. And as she's going, she's getting lighter, lighter, and all these things are falling off. That's how it felt when I was driving.
Uh-huh.
And I honestly don't tell that in the book, but it just like this fear and that thing was just like falling off and I couldn't step on the gas and go fast enough. So it was a 4-hour drive. We stopped off about halfway at my sister's gas station to gas up, and I was really afraid that they would catch me then. And he let me through, didn't say anything. So I make it all the way to Ciudad Juarez, which is very dangerous, cartel territory. But at the time, that's where the American consulate was, and I needed to go in there and to see where the paperwork and everything, how far along it was. So I got there. We hadn't eaten for 2 days because that was part of the cult's way of keeping you, like I said earlier, keeping you submissive. And there, I did have goats, so I could milk the goats, and I had made homemade rock, whatever kind of bread, some interesting bread. But I had that, so it's not like there was nothing I couldn't feed the kids, but there was just a little bit, whatever we had left. He made sure I had to ration. I didn't know how long we weren't going to eat, if he was going to go a whole week or would it be a day or two. So I really rationed out the bread. And obviously, I had the goat that helped me with the babies, and I was breastfeeding my baby. So, anyway, so we hadn't eaten. So, when I got to Ciudad Juarez, I went into the grocery store, the supermercado, and asked the lady if they received used credit cards. She said yes. I had never even used one. So I thought, okay, silly me. And every time I think about that day, I could have bought something. Why didn't I buy potato chips? Why didn't I buy candy bars? Why didn't I buy something good? I bought some bread, some milk, typical me. And then I bought 2 bags of oranges and told the kids not to touch those. And I got some bananas. And so I fed the kids, which I thought they ate great. I went over to the consulate to figure out where the status of my paperwork, found out that they needed more information. So I was going to have to either go back and wait a few more days, and it was way too risky, or continue on. I decided to continue on, and I was going to cross the children across that border illegally. So my sons had a Toyota vehicle. I had 2 boys in there, one 16-year-old and one 12-year-old. The 16-year-old did not have any identification, American license, Mexican driver's license. He had nothing. And then I had my American driver's license and my American papers, and that's all I had. So I devised a little scheme. I left the boys behind, told them to wait about an hour if you've ever crossed over from Tijuana into the United States, or from Ciudad Juarez into Arizona, crossed over there. The lines are pretty wide and it takes forever. So I told the boys, wait an hour, then get in line. So they said, okay. I left them. I could see that they were scared. When I think about the story, I honestly feel like, was this a movie I watched?
Right?
Like,
it's really made for TV. I mean, it's really anyway, please carry on.
yes, yes. And so we get in the vehicles, and so I start practicing, or in my vehicle, I start practicing with my children. So at this point, I think I have 6 of the kids, a breastfeeding baby and a 2-year-old, and every age up to 14. Anyway, so we start practicing. The Border Patrol is going to ask you, what were you doing in Mexico? We were on vacation, the kids all say. And I said, and what is our address? Well, on my driver's license, I had an American address from Salt Lake City that was one of my sister-in-law's address, but I had raised her as my own child. So I would go visit her all the time. We had a relationship. So that's the address. So I read it to the kids, 50 such and such and whatever, West Salt Lake City. So they repeat that back, and sometimes say, Mom, now what was the number, Mommy? And remind them again. So we got all prepared, made sure everybody was sitting up straight, bright-eyed, and looked right at the officer when he talks. I was shaking in my boots because I believed when I got to that little box where the Border Patrol is stationed and I have to cross to that narrow little area, there's going to be pictures of me and my kids. And he's going to take my children, ship them to Mexico. They'll take me because I'm American, into the United States without my kids. And I was trying to remember, okay, I will say, I'm here to seek asylum, help me, or whatever I was trying to do. Anyway, so I get there, and the first thing, I look behind him, and there's no pictures of any of the children or myself. So it's like, okay, And he comes over to me, and he was not real tall, but he was he had a butch haircut, kind of sandy blonde hair, broad shoulders, uh, just as tough looking border patrol. He was all American. And I looked on his thing and it said McGuire. So B. McGuire. So I knew that was his name. So he comes up to me, very friendly, nice, and he says, what's your citizenship? And I said, American citizens. And then my kids, because they got nervous, they yelled at Americans. And I think, oh my God, okay. And then he said, so what were you doing in Mexico? And then I said, oh, I took the kids for a little vacation. And he says, okay, vacation, whatever, whatever. So then he says, goes around back to check, open the trunk there, check what I was bringing in. There's whatever. I had some stuff of the kids. I didn't have any suitcases though, but there was just some of the kids' sweaters, jackets, whatever sort of thing. But now I think about it, you probably wonder where was all our suitcases. But anyways, comes back around and he says, well, what are you bringing from Mexico? And I said, oh, just some oranges. And I had already known the drill, that if you distract them with something, they forget about everything else. And oranges, I knew, could not cross into America. And I had left a bag of oranges with the other kids, with my sons. He goes, oh, ma'am, you cannot take those oranges into America. And I go, oh, you can't, darn. So then I tell the kids, find the oranges. And so they're making all this noise and they get the oranges, bag of oranges, and I hand them to him and he drops them off in the garbage. And that was all. He let me through. So I'm like, oh, good. This is great. By now it's like, 2:00 in the afternoon. And this is in the winter. So it's going to get dark around 4-ish. Or 4:30. So I cross over, go 1 block, park the vehicle, nurse my baby because I'm still breastfeeding her. And I tell them, you guys stay in the vehicle. Do not get out no matter what. Mommy will be right back. And I made my first mistake here. So I decided to cross back over to get my kids. Well, I crossed back over on the American side. You're supposed to go over to the Mexican side, speak Spanish. They let you in. I don't know what I was thinking. I'd crossed that border 100 times, but it makes for a good story. So I crossed back out. All the people are walking in, and I'm walking opposite. Lo and behold, Mr. McGuire, I'm not kidding you. Mr. McGuire is checking people in, and he looks up at me and says, what are you doing? And it's so stupid because in the cult, they train you to say something about your husband. You're never supposed to appear like you don't have a husband and you're alone. And I said, oh, my husband, he's stranded on that side and I have to go get him. And he's looking at me like, wow, okay, just go. Well, I'm dressed in this big old long dress. I had these plastic sandals and my toes are pointing out the front. My hair's a mess. I have this little red wallet. I don't know what he thought, but so I start walking back the opposite way. All the people are walking in, and I'm walking opposite of them. And I'm looking out the big windows, we're like 2 stories up, looking for the white Toyota vehicle for my children. And my heart is just racing, and I'm scared. Like, I have these kids on this side. If they catch me now, I have children on both sides. And what am I going to do? And I just had to keep going. So I get out of the building and I'm, the sun's starting to go down a little. And I'm looking up and down all these rows of vehicles. And sure enough, right where I told the boys to be on the outer lane, there's a Toyota. I go running over there. And my son, Hiram, is my second oldest son. He was just like so excited when he saw me, like, oh my God, she made it. I can't believe they trusted me to make it back. But anyway, so I get there, I tell him to get out, let mommy drive, because I have the driver's license. He can't cross. They have no papers. They have no identity whatsoever. And more than likely, they have identity, but no ID. But more than likely, he's going to mumble when the sergeant talks to him because they're scared. They've been trained to be scared of authorities because obviously the history of the cult, they're always doing illegal things. They always have and always will. So I get everybody to move over, get back in line. We keep going. And I tell the boys, okay, here's the address. This is what we're doing. We had all the suitcases. So sure enough, we get there. The gentleman at the little post is a border patrol. He asked the same questions that we asked. He did great. And he sends us over to secondary. And I've been in secondary before, so they're just going to check all the suitcases. And I know they were looking for drugs, and because they had the mirrors, they mirrored underneath the vehicle and looked everywhere. So we go over there. They're doing their thing. Hiram's petrified, and Messiah, he's 12. He's fine. He doesn't know what's going on. And I had a sick baby, so I had some of her medicine in this car in a silly little plastic bag I tied up. And they found that and they kind of questioned what that was. And the truth was, she had a cotton mouth, and I was whatever. So I tell him all this, and I'm nervous. I don't know if he suspected it of something or if I just felt that he did because they were looking for something. Just then, I see one of the border patrols approaching kind of from a distance, and then they have a German Shepherd, and the dog's coming out on the leash. And I look a little closer, and sure enough, it's the McGuire agent. I thought, oh my goodness, as I'm telling you right now, I'm getting the chills like, oh my gosh, this can't really be happening. Sure enough, he's going up and down the cars and he comes over to me on the driver's side. By now, they've let us get back in the vehicle because we're going to leave now. And he pokes his head in my vehicle and he looks me right in my face. I mean, so close that, oh my God. And he says, "You are up to something." Because now I'm here. Obviously, the 16-year-old kid is not my husband. And I don't know for sure. We'll have to ask him in heaven. I feel that I said, please. I feel that I said that. Like I was so desperate to get back to my kids.
Yeah.
I had 6 little kids in a Plymouth Voyage van that knew nothing about America, knew nothing, all depending on this scared girl. And he gets right in my face and looks at me, "You're up to something." And I felt the blood go out of my face. And I don't think I've ever begged for something in my life without begging, but it was coming from here. Just please, like, please let us go. But I don't think I said it. I don't think so. Just then, and I feel like it's a miracle. I probably should have wrote about this dog. It yanks on the leash and it pulls his arm a little. So he pulls his head out because his job was to take the dog up and down and find drugs. So it
Right.
distracts him a little bit. And I never saw him again. They blow the whistle. We pull into these lines and we go out. They had a barricade like they usually do to make it hard to get through. And within a few, maybe 10 minutes from that point, I was with my children. I never had felt so thankful in my life. I
Mm.
literally could have kissed the American soil.
Right.
And I ask myself all the time, what's the difference of this handful of dirt or the handful of dirt right over there? But this one, I was free. So we got into the vehicle. Not that no one paid the price, but it was a free soil where I was free. So I breastfed my baby, just so excited to see my little sweetie had kids. They were nervous. We jumped in, went off to the nearest gas station, gassed up again, bought them all kinds of snacks, Cokes, whatever. And I drove all night and I couldn't drive far enough. And some people asked me, well, weren't you tired? I was exhausted. I was emotionally and physically exhausted. But just knowing that I had to get away from there, I drove all night
Mm.
and most the whole next day. And that by that point, I was too far away and no one was going to be able to get me. I didn't even know where I was going for sure. I just kept driving.
Wow. Well, so where did you end up? How did you land and put your feet on the ground and now what, you know?
Like I had mentioned earlier, I had been to help my ex-husband in the United States with his pinion harvest. There was a little girl that her name was Christy. She had been brought down to me. For some reason, a lot of families would bring their teenage children to me, and I kind of raised them for a little while. I
Hmm.
must have had a special knack with kids, teenage kids. And so her grandmother, she was from the All Red Church in Utah, brought her to me when she was little. And so she wasn't that little, she was 13. And we built a really good friendship. And she was married and she had kids now. And so called her once I had gotten to, I think it's Lehigh or somewhere there in Utah. We rented a hotel. The kids were all swimming in their street clothes. I just can imagine what that looked like. Well, I didn't know. Anyways, and I called her from the hotel phone. I had her number, of course, and told her what I had done. And she was extremely happy. And I ended up going to Sandy, Utah, and stayed in an abandoned, empty trailer home and stayed there for 3 weeks. And that's where I started. I sent my two boys started working drywall, and then I started seeking house cleaning, and
Mm,
also tried to find a home. I'd never had anything in my name. I never had any legal documents of anything. So I opened my first bank account, which I still have that bank account. Sometimes I want to close it down because I get so tired of all their fees. Then I remember the long, long relationship we've had, and I can't let her go. But yeah, I opened my first bank account, Pamela Jones, and I saw a piece of paper come in the mail with my name on it. I couldn't believe that was me. Some of my funniest little memories was going down to the mailbox and retrieving mail, and it would say Pamela Jones on there, and it made me so excited that someone was thinking about me in the world, and they wanted me to have two burgers for the price of one. I believed it was real. I believed they really were thinking about me. I honestly did. I'd take those little pieces of paper, fold them up, and put them in my purse, and think, oh, someone, they knew that I would love a hamburger. So eventually I learned how to take that out and order my first hamburger, but it was really interesting. I started getting all these Visa and MasterCard offers. Well, heck, people want me to take their money. That's why I love this country. So I started filling out whatever I could fill out. And before long, I had 13 credit cards, which got me into a world of hurt. But at the time, we were so desperate. And, we ended up being around one of those fundamentalist church because the stepdaughter that I kind of raised, she was married into the Kingston's group. So a lot of the women from that group would bring us food sometimes. I didn't know at the time they're trying to get me to marry their leader, Paul Kingston. I was so naive to that. I didn't know any of that. All I wanted to do was eat and take care of my kids. So, yeah, they helped me out a little bit in the beginning. And of course, I started cleaning homes right from the beginning.
right.
And I never planned on building the American dream. I didn't know what the American dream was, but I sure in the heck knew what my dream was. And I knew my dream was well on its way once I escaped the cult. And so I put all my children into a public school. They had never gone to school because education was not for the children of the Lord. And it was really hard because my kids all had straight Fs, even on PE. It was straight
Wow.
F students. And I'd be called into the parent teacher conference, and all I do is bawl, overwhelmed, didn't understand 90% of what they were asking or they needed. And they wanted them to be in afternoon classes and extra help. And I couldn't do it. And I would just fall apart, go home. And finally, I devised a little system that we were all just going to get our first D on something. And we targeted PE first. So the first report card that came back, they did report cards back then. It came back with a D. The first child got a D. I was so excited. See, you all can do this. And we worked our way up. And I'm a proud now old mama of honor roll students. All my children ended up being super wonderful students and very intelligent. And the cults, one of their teachings or one of their things that they like to do is to keep you believing that you are not world smart, that you are dumb, especially if you're a woman. But they kept all the children thinking they're ignorant, dumb. The only thing they were good for was working hard. And when I found out, that was one of the big realizations I had, was that I actually had super intelligent kids. I was just blown away. I
Wow.
just couldn't believe that. So
Yeah.
we went on to that little thing, and it kind of matches my makeup on everything I do. You look at the whole cow, you think, okay, I can't eat it all. Let's start nibbling on the nose. So it's kind of how we did it together. Obviously, my family, my children were really supportive, and they believed in me, and their future depended on what I did. And I just felt like, if you believe in me, I can do it. And I think that really is part of the secret sauce, is that I had 9 humans. My oldest would have been 17 at the time. He came home within a couple of months after I escaped and moved it back home with us. But the belief that all of them were looking up to me, and they believed I could do anything. I was their mommy. I was their mama. They thought I could do anything. I was Superman to them or Superwoman to them. And so I made darn sure that I showed up that way. As little as silly. One of the first purchases I made was I bought a TV. The TV's of the devil. Well, I bought a TV and I plug it in, and we are laying on this stinking carpet with blankets all in the living room. And I never felt more free and happy. And I turned that TV on. That was one of the first ways I experienced my freedom, is we could watch cartoons or whatever the kids watch. I think they watched The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or who knows what they were watching back then. Boy Meets World. They're still their favorite shows to this day. But those are some of the first things that I did to experience my freedom.
Wow. Wow. What a great story. And it really is a bottom up story. I mean, you were literally clawing your way, and your children were clawing their way from the bottom. No education. I mean, hardly any education. You had all of a fifth grade education before it was taken from you. And you just worked and worked. And that's the thing that, it's interesting, because in a contrasting this time, when I came out of Scientology, I thought I was all that. I thought I was so superior to everybody, right? And so it took, and you did not have that problem, right? And I mean, very clearly from how you described this whole story, and you knew, you were clawing your way up, and for me, and unfortunately for some other people who come out of certain groups, not everybody, you come out with this delusory sort of state of how you're so superior to everybody else. And so it can take a while to humble that, and learn, when you start saying the wrong things to the wrong, to people around you and stuff, and they're like, what? And you're like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't, approach things that way. So it's a false superiority, of course, right? So having to overcome that, but the hard work, the work ethic, I think, is something that a lot of us have in common too, right? Just the willingness to do whatever, just work and work and work, because that's what we were doing in the group. That's all we were good for, was work, right? So I can work, and you immediately got onto cleaning, and I want to show people, like, just you really, like, you didn't just make a little thing, you really took off. I mean, you built something. Tell the story about that, at least in terms of the broad strokes of what you did.
Yeah, so I started cleaning homes by myself, and then we moved to Minnesota right after I started. So we came to Minnesota, and I'd never seen so much snow in my life.
Right.
The
Me
mailbox,
too.
we came in February. The mailboxes were dug out of
Yes.
snow. I had never seen
Yeah.
so much snow in my life. And we actually had a car accident on our way in. I was pulling a U-Haul. I'd never driven on black ice, didn't know that was such a thing. And
Yeah.
the trailer jackknifed, and we had a little bit of an accident. But we got back on the road, got to a beautiful home. One of my brothers was moving back down to the colony. He let me take over his house. It was a beautiful home there in Lakeville, Minnesota. We moved in with our meager little nothings. And right away, I made a bunch of, actually, someone from our church had me help her clean houses. So my sons were working in drywall, and every penny they made went to supporting the family at that point. So I right away decided I got to do something. And I was contemplating, thank God I didn't do it, but I was contemplating daycare, because I've been raising kids my whole life. And
Right.
I didn't mind being tied down to that and having the financial help that I need. But when I pulled out the calculator and calculated how many kids they'd allowed me to have and all the rules, I thought that I cannot raise this family on that. So I went off to help a church member with the house, and then a girlfriend of mine wanted me to clean her house for graduation. She was blown away with that. I got so many compliments that I finally decided I can do this. I went to the church member. She put out the silliest flyer. I didn't know anything about computers. It said, need a hand house cleaning. So I passed out, my first, I think I did 200 the first time, passed out 200 flyers. I didn't understand mailboxes, and you're not supposed to touch them and all these rules, but at least I didn't open anybody's mailbox. So we went and put all these flyers out. And on Sunday, I got my first call. I remember the feeling same feeling, like I wanted to just kiss the ground, how grateful I was. Went off and did the bid for that. She referred me a little bit. And before you know it, my first goal was to make enough money to pay my car payment. So I had a vehicle. One of my brothers was helping me with that, and they no longer could help me. And so I put the price on it. God, can you help me make that much? And after 4 weeks, I not only made enough to pay the car payment, but I could pay the insurance. So I feel like that's how I started. Then the next month, we're going to, and I'd add all these bills every month and just kept going. Pretty soon I got to where I was cleaning 11 homes a week, which is just over 2 a day. I mean, you're putting in long hours there, and I'm a perfectionist nonetheless. And I still have a baby that I would take with me to my cleaning jobs, and I'd calculate when they'd be home, when they would leave. I got caught a time or two, but the house was so immaculate, they let me get by with that. Long story short, I had got to my max. I couldn't clean anymore. So then I started thinking, well, what do we do next? My bills still were extremely high. So I'd go pick up my daughters from school. They'd get out at 2:20, and we would clean one more house every day. So at that point, they got me to cleaning 15 houses a week. Then I hired my first girl. And there's all kinds of stories because my kids, my grown up kids, as you can imagine, if you the teenagers and all the struggles. And then they were from the colony. You talked about thinking you're superior. Well, my son, at least my first son, but I noticed in a few of the kids, they thought they were above the law. Because in
Right.
Mexico, they don't have to obey the law. They just give him some money and they let him go. And he got himself in all kinds of trouble with his bad attitude, thinking that he didn't have to obey the law. Well, he learned hard. So I had those issues in the colony. Here in Minnesota, there was over 200 families from the colony that had moved here, including my mom's family, and I wanted to see them again because I wasn't allowed to see them. Oh my goodness, there was so much drama, so much work. But long story short, I just kept going. And then I hired my first Hispanic helper. After I went and had the girls after school, I really wanted them to get educated, so I didn't pull them out of school. So now what? Now we had doing this many homes, and I need more help. So I hired a little girl. Her name is Juanita, and I would take her home at 12 o'clock every day because I couldn't afford to pay her more than $50 a day. This makes me laugh now, but back then that was a lot of money. And I just kept going and saying yes and saying yes. And it took me, I think I got to back in 2009, more or less. One of my brothers saw that I was doing so well that he offered to join forces with me. He's 12 years younger than me. And he says, I'm going to invest $47,000 into your company. You go partners with me and I'll be a silent partner. So I gave him 45% of my company, and I took that money. Instead of going off and having some fun, I invested in the company to build it up and bought some vehicles so we could send out new crews and doing all kinds of stuff. One day he walks in the office and he says, I want your company. And I said, what? He says, yep, you don't deserve this company. You are just a house cleaner. You're not intelligent. I have the most successful drywall company in all the state of Minnesota. Therefore, I deserve to own your company. Well, I stood up to him and I told him, look, and very kind, no one was even fighting. I said, look, I didn't come this far to ride in the backseat of my own company. I don't care what your company does for you. You haven't touched one home. You sit in the back seat and you be silent or get out. So he kicked me out. So I sat in I sat in this office. He wants my money. He wants me out. At this point, my daughter has returned home. She had gotten married and then we ended up divorced. She returns home. She brings three little grandbabies with her. So now I'm back at the number 9. I can't seem to get the kids out. So I sit at this table. I'm scared out of my mind, but I went through my little Rolodex and I found a business card that had a lawyer's number on that. I called the lawyer. No one had ever stood up against the men from the cult. Nobody. This brother's 12 years younger than me. And he was kind. He wasn't mean to me, but he believed he deserved to own my company. Anyways, I went and had an appointment that few minutes, 1 hour later, and I told her what was going on. She told me what to do legally. And by that evening, she called him. He was flabbergasted. And then they said, what can Miss Jones do to make this right with you? And he says, she's gone too far. In other words, he's not going to be able to manipulate me. It's just not going to happen. Long story short, I
Wow.
moved out of the office, went back to my own garage, started from there again, and we went on. But it was a good lesson because it taught me to protect my assets, to protect my hard work, and that I don't care if I love this person, you still have to protect your business because there's a dog eat dog world out there. So that taught me a big lesson. I was scared. Kept going and kept going. And one day my accountant called me and said, Miss Jones, you've made $1 million. And I'm thinking, $1 million? Like, where is it? I must have 1,000,001 of bills. So I made my first million back about 10 years ago or so. Wasn't even aware of it at the time. And from there to now, we've just continued to grow and grow. And my number one goal, and the thing I love about what I do, is I have the opportunity to affect each family and each home and giving back families time with their children and their loved ones. And by cleaning their homes, it gives them back their weekends. They work hard all week to support their families and all that most everybody does out there. And they come home exhausted, and to come home to a clean house and know that they can have the weekends for their family, it just makes me feel so good. I hire we're close to 40 employees, and that's another one of the things I love the most is that these beautiful people. I spend a lot of my efforts financially and emotionally and any other way pouring into my employees because they take care of my clients, and then my clients take care of me. So I have amazing clients that I've had quite a few of them for 15 years straight through, and that's unheard of. I come from Mexico. I was married to Hispanic. Somehow or another with that, and I hire quite a few Hispanic people that work for me. They feel like family to us, and I think that secures the quality of help that I have. My children have all grown up. They all have, not all, I think four of them work for me, and they have different divisions, and they've helped take the company to the next level because I can only see it so far. My vision was to give me an amazing life and pay all my bills. The kids are taking it to the next level. So I've just learned to never say no. I've been out in the field. My clients still know of me. I have an email list of over 3,000 emails, and they all personally know me and have been waiting for my book, and they listen to my story. And I've gone through weddings and funerals and divorces. And I mean, I could tell stories to the cow come home, but I wouldn't because I don't like to tattle on my employee and my clients. I mean, but they are truly my family and friends. And it touches my heart that I've been given such an opportunity to actually be in so many homes. And I want to share a little story. Back when I first met my husband, his oldest son was in hockey, and one day we were talking about the general manager for the Wilds here in Minnesota. His name was Fletcher, and my sweetheart was telling me all about Fletcher. Oh, he does this and all the things he did for these teams. I didn't even know what hockey was, but anyways, he's telling me all about this general manager, and he's going on and on and on. And when he finishes, I said, "Well, I bet you can't tell me the color of his tile in his bathroom." And he looks at me like, "What?" I said, "He's my client." And he just thought that was funny. I said, "You may know a lot about hockey, but I know what kind of shampoo he uses."
That
So,
is
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, a lot of
That's
the
funny.
Vikings are Thielen and Jennifer, his wife, they've been my clients for years, and they've moved on to do other things, so I can talk about that. But I have lots of interesting clients, and I've learned a lot about politics and all kinds of stuff through my clients, and I've learned to protect my employees and our integrity. And money's not everything. I've turned things down due to that of integrity in my daughters. I'm not willing to put my daughters in someone's home or my granddaughters, and I sure I'm not putting my employees in there. And it's been a lot of fun learning and seeing the potential for myself and my children. And here I am. We've rebranded as Exclusive Services by My Girls. I had named my company My Girls. I was so innocent back then because I'd always tell people, "Oh yeah, me and my girls will do this, and my girls we can do that." I have 5 daughters, and took me hard knock to find out about websites and stuff. And I was with my pastor. Well, back when I followed churches and stuff, so it had been about 15 years ago, and he had cancer, so we were offering free services to help his family while he went through chemo. One day he's walking into church and he says, "Pamela, what's the name of your company?" And I look at him like it's very logoed my vehicle, and I said, he says, it's not my girls and it's not clean my girls. I thought, what are you talking about? He says, I was with someone from church and I Googled that. No, the sites that came up, he told me. I thought, oh my gosh. And he says, it's pornography. And I was like, oh, Lord Jesus. And I said, it's my girl's house cleaning. And I regretted that because here I am to protect my children. And my girl's evidently is pornography. But there's always a little humor in everything we do.
Right, right.
Yep.
It's just
And
the world we live in. That's hilarious.
I was innocent towards it. It made me laugh. He's the one that brought it to my attention. And I thought, well, I
Wow.
didn't know. By then, I was a legal company. I've been a legal company for a good 10 years. So we rebranded as exclusive services by My Girls. And some people still seem to claim that does sound a little fishy, but we offer exclusive services only to our clients, handyman and organization. We don't advertise those services to anybody out there unless they're actually one of my clients, and that's why we call. I don't matter. I don't need to explain to anybody. And sometimes maybe something a little bizarre like that can help you. I don't know. It is what it
It
is.
is what it is. It's worked for you, and that's what counts.
It has.
And clearly you have become a raging success with this. Now, I have one more question for you, just to harken back to one thing, a little closure on one thing, right? Because I'm curious, and I'm sure people who've heard your story here are going to be curious. So you escaped, you got away.
Yes.
What's your husband at that time? Because now you're obviously remarried and everything. But what was there any follow up from your husband? Did he pursue you? Did he kind of try to find you? You connected with other family members, but not people who were going to drag you back to that world. So what was there ever any response from that?
Yes, so in the cult, the belief is so you're never legally married. I was his first wife. He had several wives. I was his first wife. He was not married to any of us, and he made that very clear. You are married, and I am not. So when I left, I did not have to get divorced, but the church requires a 6 month window where you don't pursue someone else and you give your ex husband those 6 months to woo you back. Well, he was so confident that I would come back that he wasted 5 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days of those 6 months doing whatever he was doing. And by the time he tried to come get me back or come back into Utah to kind of talk with me, which we did have a really good talk, he had brought in one of his other wives with him, but not to my home, but into Salt Lake City. But we had a really good talk. And he acknowledged why I had left. And he just said, what I had done to you was not right. It's like I took away your freedom and it wasn't right. I took something from you that wasn't mine to take, which was
Wow.
which was a great acknowledgement. He also promised to build me a new home. By then, I would have been married 19 years. And then he also promised to take me on a honeymoon that he thought I deserved because I didn't get one. And we talked about the women in his life. There was one in particular that made my life very hard. It was one of his brother's wives that he decided to marry. Well, his brother had passed away. He decided to marry his brother's widow, and she assumed my position, so it made it a lot easier to leave at the time. But he started talking on about different things that were going on with their families, and I finally told him, "Look," his name was David. I said, "Look, yes, your wife," and called them by name, wife number one, or whatever they were, called them by name. I said, they ended up with you just like they wanted and just like you wanted. You wiped my kids off for they would have this scale where they would write the name, the firstborn child, and every child he'd have would be in this line of how they were born. That was the way all cult members did with their children. Well, my ex-husband marries his brother's wife. And then all of a sudden, my kids are demoted and her kids because they're quite a bit older with there. And that was really heartbreaking. Like, what, Anyway, so that's why I told him, look, she wins. She got you, And he says, I'm sorry, what I did was wrong or whatever he says. I said, but I said, I found me and I got me. I win. And that was my answer to him, that I would never lose myself to belong to anybody. And it kind of funny that now that I was leaving him, well, now he could see he did wrong. Well, now he was going to build me a house because I lived in a sheep pen for a while there, and could go on to talk about the homes I lived in and what he put me through. And it was more because I was white. I had married someone that was racist, and there was this belief. And I think he thought if he kept me humble, he could prove that that he didn't love me or love me more, or whatever the story was. Anyways, so that's what I answered him with, and it's not for sale. They won. Those women won. They won the fight. They took my husband. You guys got your life, whatever. I was telling him, and I was happy, and he was peaceful about it. I said, but I got me, and she's not for sale. And
Good.
I never looked back. He did walk my oldest daughter down the aisle, who married, I believe, 3 years later. But she had been almost 15 years with him, and she felt she needed that. And so that was great. But the other daughters chose differently, and I walked all my other daughters down the aisle. He had been to most of the kids' weddings, and they would see him every now and then. So it's been an actually easy divorce when it comes to him.
Good.
There was only one little event when he came to Minnesota. He got a little bit violent once. I had a boyfriend that bothered him, and I had fake nails at the time, and he ripped the phone out of my hand. And so you're gonna laugh. I did call the cops. I knew I could. So
Good.
I called 911, and because he was threatening to steal my kids. And I lived in Minnesota. He was just here visiting. The cops showed up, and I didn't even know how to act. I said, I don't really want you to do anything. I just want to make you aware this man is threatening to take my children. He says, well, who has custody of the kids? I said, I do. He asked me his name, and they took the license plate from his truck, whatever, and they went and pounded on the door and called him out by name, David LeBaron, really loud. You know how cops can talk.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't come out. And so then the police officer came over to me and my daughter, who was crying hysterically because he didn't physically hurt me, but he was very aggressive in the way he was responding. And he just said, this man is a coward, because he should come out and talk. If he attacked a woman, he should say why he did it. Long story short, he never threatened me again. He realized I would use anything and everything to keep my children safe, and he was never going to take them. I don't think he even wanted them. He wanted me. I don't think he wanted to take the kids, because what was he going to do with them?
Right.
But he wanted to get me. But once that happened, it kept him calm. And from that day to now, he's never given me any trouble. He has nothing to do with the children by choice. I've never taken my children from him. I've, in fact, told my children that he was victim to the same cult I was victim to. He was just male. When he
Yeah.
left his mother's body and they said it's a boy, then he had a whole line of privileges, we'll just say rules, whatever, that came in play for him.
Right.
And long story short, each child has to decide their journey and with their father and what they will and will not do. I think I have one son that has compassion on his dad and tries to save his father's soul. So he spends a lot of time talking to him to get him to heal him or whatever, and bless his heart for that. But each one of them will have their story on how this all played out for them. And I tell the kids all the time, Mommy never took daddy from you. Never. I just stopped being dad's wife. And I came to America, to my country, because that's where I was raised, to find myself and my freedom. And you were little, so I brought you with me. Your dad chose not to have anything to do with you. That's on him. Because a father
Right.
is a father no matter where his children are on this earth. And he chose not to be there. So that's
Right.
my story when it comes to that. And there's all kinds of little bits and pieces, but all my children are married. I'm a grandmother of soon to have 31 grandchildren.
Wow.
Our little tiebreaker will be born in September, the day my book gets released. Believe it or not, I have 15 granddaughters and 15 grandsons, and we will have the tiebreaker born right around the time the book releases. My husband and I, we've been together since 2011. We married in 2012. He has 7 beautiful grandchildren and 2 children, and bless his little heart, but I think he's just having a time of his life, like a little roller coaster ride, watching all the stories and all the ins and outs. I took him to the colony after I'd been gone for 10 years or so. I took him to the colony, and he loved it down there. They rolled out the royal carpet for myself and him, and they have the most beautiful homes you can imagine, even beautiful for America. Mansions. There's so much money in that cult down there. As I mentioned earlier, they are in cartel territory either way. And anyways, he was just blown away with the hospitality, and there's a lot of amazing people, which I imagine you can say the same of the places you left. There's
Sure.
victims and amazing people. But he loved it down there, and I thought, I can't afford to take you down there again. There's too many women that want my man. I'm kidding you.
Fair
I'm
enough.
seriously kidding you. No, I'm.
No, I get it. I get it. Well,
Uh,
listen, Pamela, I really, really, really want to thank you for being so generous with your time and sharing your story and all the details and you're clearly just kind of an awesome person. So it all kind of makes sense that you would end up this way, and we're obviously, as you said a couple of times, there's a million details and a million little conflicts and dramas and hills to climb and barriers to overcome in this journey, but the broad strokes are clear. You did the right thing for yourself and for your kids. You worked your ass off. They work their asses off to make something of all of this, and you've succeeded. And you were not set up to do that at
And
all.
want to add one more last thing before you let me
Please.
go. So the 4th of July is coming, in a couple of days, but I don't know when this will air. And when I left Mexico, one of my many goals that I had was I wanted my children to truly, truly become citizens of America. I wanted them to truly love this country and feel at home, because I felt that it was my home when I was little. My grandfather had gone to World War II, and my family was all from here. My mother was raised here. And I just, in my heart, I just thought, if my children just could just embrace this country. When I first left Mexico, and then they'd play all this Mexican music, and I would just hate it. Like, oh my gosh, I just, nothing's wrong with Mexican music, but I just felt like, and it took a while. But my oldest son is 43, and he has taken on this 4th of July event. And I almost want to cry when I think about it. But I know 4th of July is America's Independence Day, but truly it feels like our Independence Day, where we were able to truly become Americans, which we already were, but truly embrace that and the heroism and the history of this country. As I did nothing that I feel more grateful for than that. And my son has 13 acres, and we go out there and he does the big fireworks, which are illegal, but they allow him. He does the fireworks, and there's over 80 of us out there, and it's become a family tradition. And I have a daughter-in-law that sings opera. She's from Alaska, and she used to sing for all of the games that they would play. Well, now her third child, she's 13, and she will be singing uh, what do you call it? Not the Star Spangled Banner. Is that what it's called?
Oh yeah.
She'll be singing on the 4th of July, and my heart is just so full and complete. Like, I love this country. I love our people, the people. I love what we stand for. I love our forefathers, what they fought for. I know I'm a drop in the bucket or cannot be compared. But I fought to be here, and I fought for freedom, and I fought for the freedom of my children. I don't take it lightly. And I would love it if every one of your listeners there can, if they're not reminded, can be reminded of how blessed we are as a nation to have this beautiful country to call home. And I'm so excited for the 4th. It's not my favorite holiday of the year by far. I love Christmas, but the 4th, I just feel a sense of gratitude to be an American and be on this soil and have the freedom to talk to you clear across the country, wherever you're at, and be able to have freedom of speech and so many other things. And I just wanted to share that with you today. I'm
Thank you.
super excited.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. It needs to be underlined and bold-faced, right? That it's something we have to work for, and it's something we have to remember, that it's, the price of freedom, as they have said through the ages, right? Is, that sort of constant diligence, that constant willingness to fight back, and that's what you did. And because a lot of people rolled over in that system and didn't know, didn't have the gumption to step out of it, and you did. And I know you kind of downplayed earlier your role in, other women and this sort of domino effect that happened when you left. But that's, I don't have any problem seeing that's, on you, because that's the inspiration that we can bring to people's lives and bring change for them that they couldn't necessarily bring all by themselves. That's why we need to act community and act family and that kind of thing. So I 100% with you.
I appreciate
100%.
that. Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I just wanted to share that because
Yeah.
I feel, even talking to you, I just feel if I haven't said it once, then I'll say it again, but I'm sure I've already said it. I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to speak to
Yeah.
you. And I feel such gratitude to be here in America today.
Yeah.
I
I
could
hear
be
you.
in Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now I'm going to tell people, and it's been on the screen here while we've been talking, but it is pamelaspeaks.live is her website. You can go check that out. And she talks about her story, and there's pictures and there's things, and you should check that out. And if you want to reach out to you, that would be the way to do so, is through that.
Exactly. Go
Right.
there. You can send me a little email, a little message, and I'll for sure get back to you. And you also can pre-order my book anywhere that books are being sold. You can pre-order it there.
Awesome.
And also, I'm engaged in a podcast with place where we expose all the hypocrisy from the cult that I left. If you're curious about what goes on in those cults, whose night is whose and whose, we have all the juicy detail. We do that for fun. So I do that as well. But yeah, that's
Right.
pretty much it. Or you can find me
Great.
right here on your show too.
Well, of course, of course. But I find sometimes folks listen to these and they really want to connect with my guests, and so I always try to put that opportunity there for
Thank
them.
you. Yeah, and I appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
And your book
Yes.
is coming out. Do you have a date in September for when
The
it's releasing?
9th of September. The 9th of September, it is dropping that day, and I will still be 59 for 2 more days. I wish they would have done the 11th, but anyway, so it'll be the last of my 50s. Hurrah! Enjoying the fact that I actually was able, a person that couldn't speak English, much less spell English, actually wrote her memoir and dared to tell her story. And I'm so
Wow.
proud of myself. And I'm thankful that there's people that are interested in the story. And I feel honored and humbled that you took this time to interview me.
That's what I do. Thank you, Pam. All right, folks out there, I hope y'all found this entertaining, informative, and educational. Like we said at the top, this is what we try to do here. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.